This time on WrassleVerse with Mike Akers, I have a hometown guy. We're from the same place. We're from Princeton, Indiana. Comedian Bo Greer is joining me. We're going to talk about all kinds of great things, pro wrestling and all kinds of other stuff. How's it going, Bo? How you doing, man?
Man, hey, thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of the show. I'm glad that I finally get to join you in the WrestleVerse, but things are going good. I'm traveling around. I drive a truck around the country so I can afford to travel and do my comedy. You
Sure.
know, back in the day, I'm pretty sure you've heard the stories of like Rodney Dangerfield or
Yeah.
JB Smooth. They used to sell things like carpets, and JB Smooth said he used to sell fire extinguishers.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
obviously, since the invention of Amazon, you can't make money going city to city
Yeah.
selling things like that.
That's
So you
true.
got to get creative. And I'm hauling freight, and it's an adventure in itself. A lot of comedy comes from hauling freight, let me tell you.
Oh, I'm sure there is.
Mm.
And which I mean, well, I mean that's pretty good little swing into you're going around the country, you're hitting the big cities, and I'm sure you have some downtime, and I'm sure you use that time to get into either open mics or something like that, right?
Yeah, the big thing I'm shooting for right now, as you might know, or if you haven't heard, Joe Rogan flipped the comedy world upside down. And now it seems like every time I hear about a new comedian and I trace them back, it's like the world found them in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
So I just told my dispatcher, I said, do whatever you got to do. I don't care if we got to go up the East Coast, back down. I need to end up in Austin, Texas in the next couple weeks.
Right.
And along the way, I'll pop in, I'll work on some material. But
Mm.
with Kill Tony being there and its launching careers, I'm going to go there a couple of days and put my name in the hat, see if I can get a shot. But there's just a lot of places to be seen and audition to get quality time where you're getting 5 to 10 minutes and they're paying you to open for somebody. But
Right.
along the way, it's fun, man. I tell you, a lot of people, when you want to do something and it's right in front of you. And I was going to bring this up. I played college football.
Right.
If you guys don't know, I played for the University of New Mexico. And when I tried to go in the NFL, the only teams that wanted me was like the Giants and the Texans wanted me to come work out. You know, a free agent, bare minimum, league minimum, all that. And I really didn't have the money to just go to Houston and not get a job, or go to New
Yeah.
Jersey and not get a job and try and make the team. So I was looking at other options. And my agent, he was from Southern California. So he had, been around the entertainment world. And he tells me, he said, you should try out for WWE. And I was like, I never thought of it,
Yeah.
because he knew I was an actor.
Mhm.
I had no idea. I just always thought Dwayne Johnson was that guy. I didn't realize how many other wrestlers and entertainers had crossed that path or at one time been there.
There's
So
a
I did
ton.
it's insane. Like,
Yeah.
people have no idea. Now, I would say the only league that rivals football and WWE with bringing out actors and entertainers would be UFC. I love
Sure.
how the martial arts and
Yeah.
movies has gotten so much better since they started hiring those
Mhm.
guys. But I did this. And my friend, rest in peace, Ryan, he taped it in his backyard. I did some moves. I made a character, did the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I got a few emails and it went back and forth. But at that time, it wasn't what was really in my soul. So I wasn't
Mhm.
willing to get on that bus and go after it. The comedy, getting on stage, making people laugh, bombing, failing,
Yeah.
you can never perfect it. That makes me want to get on the road. And
Sure.
that's what I'm doing right now. And I'm blessed to do it. So,
And you brought up that people really don't realize the ties of football and pro wrestling, and there's more than that too, because you have Olympic wrestlers, you have weightlifters, you have all that, but
yeah.
football is very interesting because I mean a lot of people will know like the newer wrestlers, you have Rock and you have Roman Reigns played a bit, and a handful Baron
Hmm.
Corbin played, but I mean you go back to like when we were growing up, Lex Luger, uh,
Yeah. Ric
Vader.
Flair.
Flair played a little
Uh,
bit. Austin played
yeah.
somewhere, I think. But
Hmm.
the one that I mean, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time is Ron Simmons. And
Okay.
if you talk about Ron Simmons, I believe it's FSU, the guy is a god in FSU.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
one of my favorites of all time. He was a WCW world champion. And it's just that it is so weird because you go from football being violent, especially in that day,
Hmm.
to wrestling, it's a different personality, I think. Or is it a different personality? That's why I wanted to talk to you about too. Are you, I mean, really personality wise, is it that different from jumping from football to pro wrestling?
No, I knew right away when he suggested it, and then the type of movie roles that I still get auditioned for, and the things they ask me to do, it's that switch. And they
Mhm.
know that football players possess that ability to be the guy that they can put out in front of a campaign to raise money for children that are dealing with leukemia. And you go to the hospital and you read books and you take
Yeah.
pictures, but then also to going on that field to being the type of guy that wants to not see anyone in the opposite color jersey walk off that field.
Right.
You're out there to destroy. And I noticed that in a lot of the guys that I seen that went into other avenues of sports entertainment, because regardless, I don't care what people say, there's just as much risk doing wrestling. They can say, oh, it's staged, it's whatever it is. It's just
Mhm.
like doing stunts in a movie.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we know that you're really not robbing that bank and that you're really not outrunning the NSA
Yeah.
and the CIA. But
Yeah.
if that car that you're going to jump across that creek doesn't make it, that stunt driver is going to be hurt or killed.
For
That's
sure.
real.
Yeah.
And that when it comes to entertainment, whether it's football, it's MMA, it's wrestling, it's pro boxing, anybody who's going to survive in that. I mean, look at Mike Tyson.
Mhm.
Mike Tyson didn't figure out until later in his career that, okay, I can't tell everybody that I want to eat their children,
Right.
but they know that's what's on my mind. So I'm
Sure.
just going to bring that down a little bit. I'm going to become more vulnerable, cry on camera, let people know I'm a human.
Yeah.
But we all know that what we might witness in the ring with Jake Paul, yeah, it's entertainment, but that's going to be scary. We haven't
It's going,
seen Mike turn that switch on in a long
it's going to be business when the bell rings. Yeah. I mean, it is.
Oh,
Let's not call it what it, I mean, it's going to,
that's like what I. No, go ahead. Go
I mean,
ahead.
let's just say for the sake of the argument, Mike Tyson doesn't come out of this the way everyone thinks he's going to.
Yeah.
Fine. No one's really going to be mad about it, but
No.
everybody wants to see Iron Mike Tyson when that bell hits.
Yes. Yes.
And I
There.
good for Jake Paul for acting like he's not afraid.
Oh,
I,
he's afraid.
I would be terrified now. You know what I mean? Not I mean, there's no chance. This can't happen, right?
No.
I mean, it's
You still have to take a punch from him.
yeah,
Literally, one of the funniest scenes in one of the best comedy movies in the past 20 years is a comedian taking a punch from Mike Tyson
yeah,
in the, you know what I'm talking about, Hangover.
yeah, yeah,
And it's because there's not a man, woman, or child, no matter how old or young they are, that when the writers were in the room, they're like, well, who could we have in Vegas? And somebody probably said, oh, I bet I could get Oscar De La Hoya or Mayweather to do it. And they're like,
right,
people aren't going to fear that punch. And
yeah,
then somebody goes, you know what? I smoked weed with Mike Tyson a couple weeks ago. I bet I could get him to do it. And everybody goes, oh, shit.
yeah,
Oh, that's perfect.
yeah.
Because you know, at no age, you're like, oh, I want to get hit by Mike Tyson tomorrow. Nobody
Oh, yeah,
wants that
even right
shit.
now, because he's what? He's 60?
No.
Is he 60 now?
Yeah. I don't want to get
Yeah.
punched by my dad and he's 74 years old.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the entertainment thing too. And Mike
Yeah.
Tyson, he's been in that world. He's done the WWE stuff. He was a big part of oh man, just whichever WrestleMania that was when he was part of Shawn Michaels and Stone Cold Steve Austin's big main event. So he
Yeah.
knows how to entertain. And
Yep.
but I think you watch him now today, it's that hey, I've had enough of this. Let's go ahead and do it. You know, he's
Yeah.
not playing around. And it's
You know,
so
it's funny. You say like, here's my two Mike Tyson stories. I so I would get booked to do background extra work and be around Grey's Anatomy a lot when I was in LA living and just trying to survive. And there was a young, beautiful African American casting director that would always call me and book me and keep me working because I'm like, hey, I'm sleeping in an apartment with four other broke ass actors and comedians, and I need money.
yeah,
So she would keep me working. And you know, when you're a big guy like myself, everybody doesn't respond to you the same way. They don't have that, you know. So I was like, man, she's really cool. She sees that I'm my inner teddy bear. She knows that I'm a real guy, just a normal dude. And I remember one day I go back And I'm like, hey, where's she at? And they're like, oh, you didn't hear? She got an offer that she just couldn't turn down. She got a hell of a job. And I'm like, where'd she go? They're like, oh, she's gonna be Mike Tyson's personal assistant for that his animated show, The Mystery
Oh
Team.
yeah, yeah,
She helped
yeah.
produce and do a lot of that. And I was just right away, I'm like, wow, she wasn't afraid to work with me, and she's obviously not afraid to work
Yeah.
with Mike Tyson. So
Sure.
there you
Yeah.
go. And then another time we were in Mexico when I was playing college football, and this is when Iron Mike was still Iron Mike. Like
Mm.
if you were around Phoenix or like Albuquerque, Las Vegas, you went down to Puerto Penasco, Cancun, whatever. You would be somewhere, and somebody would be like, "Hey, I heard Mike Tyson's having a party." Now, if you've read his book or you know any of the podcasts, listen to Joe Rogan, there for a few years, like right up to when his daughter died. Remember how it changed
Yeah.
his life?
Yeah.
Mike Mike snorted a couple $100 million in cocaine.
Sure. Yeah.
So if a bunch of strippers or a bunch of people you party with, football players, baseball players, said, I heard Mike Tyson's having a party, you're like, where's it at? Like, we need to be at this party. My boy tells the story. He was from Phoenix. He said one time, this was his partner's uncle, because obviously we weren't old enough to be in the game then. But he said his partner's uncle was afraid because the Muslims, when they took over Mike, they told him not to sell him any more cocaine.
Mhm.
And he was a part of that whole crew of
Yeah.
where you're caught in between the Muslims saying don't sell him any cocaine,
Yeah.
and then Mike's got your number. He's like, "Where are you at?" Like,
Yeah.
could you imagine how
Yeah.
terrifying?
Yeah.
You would at that moment. I would go to the FBI, the DIA's office, and I'd be like, "Look, I'm here to turn myself in. I got Mike Tyson trying to buy cocaine, and the Muslims said if I sell it to him, I'm going to be fucked. So please put me in prison. I want nothing to do with any of this
Yeah.
shit." But yeah, man, I remember we were in Puerto Penasco, Rocky Point, and we kept going to random houses because we never found it. We didn't have a hard time finding drugs because it's Mexico, but we were like, is this Mike Tyson's party? We did that shit for like 3 hours. And then everybody who found it the next day was like, oh my God, we went in there, the door was wide open, there was strippers, and there was just a pile of blow on the table. I'm like, damn it, I couldn't find the house. Oh, the desert. Fun
Oh
times.
man. So let's bring it back and let's talk about some pro wrestling.
Let's do it.
And we're along the same timeline. We grew up around the same time. And
Yeah.
for me, I was a big WCW fan growing up. Were you a WWE guy? Were you WCW? They were both hot when we were
All the
younger.
way. All the way up until the Ultimate Warrior, rest in peace. When that all fizzled out,
Mm,
I naturally gravitated towards Sting with the similar
sure.
face paint.
Yeah.
And then NWO took over my world. Like I remember I used to wear the Wolfpack NWO shirt
Yeah.
like 3 days a week to school. I had an NWO belt. I had all that shit, dude. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was really into it. I had the ring the hard plastic
Yeah.
ring, and I
Yeah.
used to have all the wrestlers stacked up around my room. I was really into that shit.
Yeah.
But my era where from the acting standpoint and for my critique to modern wrestling, the reason I can still watch anything from the 80s to about the early 2000s and still be entertained is there was just more action, less talking. I
Okay.
love that era because it was like the steroid, big body,
Yeah.
I'm gonna F you up era.
It was the larger than life.
Now, yeah, yeah. And now it's like everybody's trying to be a wordsmith and be clever with the mic in their hand. I'm like, listen, you want to be comedians? They got an open mic down the road.
Yeah.
I need to see you guys throw each other because that's what we're here for.
Well, see, there are some pro wrestlers that have made that transition to stand-up comedy.
Mm-hmm.
One is, which he still wrestles today, is Nick Nemeth, who is Dolph
Okay.
Ziggler. I know he's done stand-up every now and again and does similar things. Mick Foley, Jake Roberts,
Oh,
The Undertaker.
hilarious.
The Undertaker has a one-man show. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting to see kind of this. They're finding lives after pro wrestling to take pro wrestling to different audiences. So I mean, it's unbelievable. And it's so weird how these lines all intersect. Of stand-up comedy is, you're right, it's like a promo without the wrestling in a
Yeah,
sense.
and they learned okay, I think when you boil it all down, and the reason you see football and baseball and basketball players and always transitioning through sports and entertainment in many different areas is because you learn that pop. I used to remember when I played high school football, you get a sack on the quarterback, or if you're an offensive lineman and you're pulling up on a linebacker, and you knew there was a moment in that crowd where the ball was snapped, everybody took a breath because they're waiting to hear what's coming, and then the ball gets passed off or the quarterback goes to pass it, where you can unload on somebody and you can literally hear 15 to 20,000 people go, "Oh,"
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And you're like, "Oh yeah, I did that shit."
Right.
And what transitions into stage, and especially for the pro wrestling, their whole gimmick is making that person in the top row all the way down to the first row react to a big slam, a drop, a kick. And so I could see where it would be natural to go get on stage because that's all it is timing,
Yeah.
being funny. I've seen guys work an act and then you're back in the green room or you're having drinks or you're eating afterwards and you're like, you know what, man? If you just slowed down and sounded like your mama hit you in the head with a shovel when you was 5 years old, that would be hilarious. And the
Yeah.
same joke, the same premise, now spoken at a rate of half the speed, people are falling out of their chair and they can't get enough of that bit. Then you see those things and you're like, it's like, what do they say walking is? It's a controlled fall.
Yeah.
So you're just learning how to control the fall and not fall on your face every time you get up in front
Yeah.
of a crowd. That's all.
And that's stand-up comedy. I would never even dream to try it. It's not, I mean, some people I'm sure think that you just go up there and try and be funny. And that's just not what it is. It's, I mean, it's a whole thing. There's a layout, there's a process to it. And it really is an art form. And I think that plays into a lot of pro wrestlers too, is there's so many more things to it than just doing the one thing, being in front of people. Because pro wrestling, I
Nope.
mean, there's a lot to it. I don't claim to know any of it, but I know it's a lot more than what I think it is.
Yeah. Oh man, I would love to know the inside as to how, because I know it's just a big choreographed dance. It's a move,
Mhm.
and I would love to know what types of inside things that these guys know about each other. That if a certain wrestler does this move 3 times, you know that you better finish with this because if you don't, you're gonna tick him off. And then when you try to do your finishing move,
Right.
he's gonna not cooperate with you. And I know there's those types of things in the industry
Yeah.
that people know. And one thing I will say about our era, what we grew up in, and the one thing that I do respect, because I don't want the new wrestlers, I have so much respect for the new wrestlers because they live their life the correct way.
Mhm.
They all are there's more postgraduate and doctorate degrees in pro wrestling now than any professional sport. They have more educated people than freaking NASA. It was a
Mhm.
joke. I thought it was a joke. And then I started reading into it on the internet. And I'm like, what has Vince McMahon been doing? Hanging outside of Stanford and MIT looking for pro wrestlers?
Yeah.
But they do. They have a lot of
Yep.
highly educated, intelligent people. And the one thing I will say is the quality of the wrestler, the
Mhm.
moves, they're way better now. You look back
Okay.
on Hogan and some of them
Yeah.
guys back then, and I'm like, dude, you couldn't even touch your toes. I'm 40 years old and I know my limits on a movie set, but I'm like, yeah, this dude's 50 and he's out there trying to sell pay-per-view tickets to see him kind of wrestle. It's like, don't ask me to bend over too far. I won't be able to get back up. It's just like,
See,
dude.
I love the old school wrestling. I like the old stuff. It is slower. It for sure is
Yeah.
slower. But I mean, yeah, it's just different eras, I guess. But you talk
Did you
about
see the Colin Quinn story? Not to cut you off
no, you're fine.
about the. Did you see that where he has that show on YouTube and he goes around catching different neighborhood stories that are like of
No,
legend? And
no.
he talked to these two brothers who one night they were in Hell's Kitchen and it was dark and they were high and they got to fighting and they were drinking and both of them got thrown out in the curb and they were two of the like bullies in Hell's Kitchen. They collected money from people. So everybody's like, well, who in the hell were you fighting? The NYPD shows up. They're like, stay out here on the curb. They go inside. It's Andre the Giant. And that's the one thing I will say. Yes, those guys were slower, but if I had to put up street fight versus wrestling match, I'm taking the 80s and 90s wrestlers in a street fight all day
Oh man,
over today's wrestlers.
you hear guys like Haku Ming, who
Mm-hmm.
is everybody is like that's the toughest guy ever. You have guys like Harley Race who will snatch your eyeball out of your head. You know, I
Yeah,
mean, Vader. I'll bring up Vader as many times as I can, just because that dude.
Vader's a beast.
I loved watching Vader. I just watched a match between him and Davy Boy Smith from like '93. It
Okay.
was Slamboree, and man, the dude was just so good, and he was so big. And you go watch his stuff in Japan. That's you. I mean, that's almost as real as it gets as pro. You know what I mean? As far as
Yeah, yeah.
just throwing haymakers and everything's hard hitting. But you were talking about wrestlers being educated. One of my favorite ones is D'Lo Brown, who
Okay.
is, I believe, like he was a full-fledged CPA. I may be wrong on that, but he was like
Oh wow.
he was either a CPA or he was in accounting, something like that. And then he became a pro wrestler, and he's always been one of my favorites too. Which he was, I don't know if you remember D'Lo or not. He was from
Yeah.
Nation of Domination, WWE, all that
Mhm.
stuff. But so
Yep.
where,
Yep.
I mean, because I mean, you went from Ultimate Warrior to Sting, which is great.
Yeah.
Sting's one of my favorites of all time. I got a chance to meet him a few months ago. Awesome dude,
Oh shoot.
great guy.
Hell yeah.
Me and my son went to meet him at a convention, and we took a picture with him, and super nice. But it's with Sting. You always talk about, you meet those. I don't want to say meet your heroes, but I mean those people that you're like, this is it for me in pro wrestling. This is the one that's still alive. I could still meet. That was my favorite. There's
Mhm.
such a feeling when you're standing there that you're just like, I don't even know what to say to this dude. It's
Yeah.
Sting. What do you what am I gonna do? It's like, hey man, thanks for wrestling.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so
No,
cool.
man. So, it's funny. It was on TV last night. I was late sitting up here in the hotel, and the remake of The Longest Yard came on.
Okay.
And so, what you're talking about, I can totally tell you about this story. First, I go to the University of New Mexico, and it's 2 months before school starts, but I want to get there for summer workouts so I can get acclimated with the team. So, coach can't put me on campus, and I can't afford an apartment in the city. So he finds one of the teammates, an older guy, he's a senior. He has space in his apartment, and they let me go stay with him. Well, he was friends with a trainer whose dad was the head of all athletic training. So he had a little juice on campus and around the state. He was friends with like Don Haskins, who won the national championship with the first starting black five at El Paso. He's good friends with him. And so I didn't know at this time when I went to the University of New Mexico, I knew I was getting closer to Hollywood. I knew they shot westerns and some movies out there. I didn't know about the explosion that was getting ready to happen with Lionsgate and the Netflix coming eventually.
Yeah.
So he tells me, he's like, oh, guess what? My dad just found out that they need equipment for a football movie. And apparently it's going to have like Adam Sandler and all the pro wrestlers in it and everything, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, dude, that sounds cool. I want to be in movies. Come to find out, they ended up coming to our practice. And when you see like nothing that shows the shoulder pads are up and it's just the feet moving, that's like our practice video. Like they use
Oh,
some of
cool.
that and
Yeah.
different stuff. But it was really cool. So he's working on set every day because they used our trainers to be the trainers for the football shots to make sure the guys were all taped up right. They're
Mhm.
hydrated. They're not going to hurt themselves. And we got to meet and hang around a lot of these guys. And I'm just in awe. Who's the big 7-foot wrestler that was in that movie? Like, I felt, here I am, this big
Ali.
new recruit. Yeah, I was a junior college All-American, and I'm standing next to this WWE guy that can wrap his hands
Yeah.
around my entire head and just pick me up off the ground.
Yeah.
And you're just in awe of the power and the size. And I'm like, no matter what those guys did the night before, if you've seen them out eating barbecue and they were drinking beers until 1 in the morning or whatever, or like one time Michael Irvin and Bob Sapp and them, they rented out a hotel and they stocked it full of alcohol and stuff for us, and we went up and had a good time. Them guys hit the gym every day.
Yep.
Like they go to the gym. Bob Sapp, hey, can somebody come pick me up? I need
Bob
to go to
Sapp,
the
dude.
gym.
Yeah.
Huge, just
Yeah. Yeah.
huge. But a teddy bear, nicest guy you ever meet. Are you kids
His is a
hungry?
great story. Bob Sapp
Great story.
in general. As we don't have enough
Yes.
time now to cover Bob Sapp, but I could talk about Bob Sapp for a while. He's
Yeah.
what a story. And I mean, it's just from MMA to Japan to
Yes.
putting out albums in Japan. The guy is a superstar in Japan.
Mega star over there. Like Warren Sapp,
Yeah.
people used to always be talking about Warren, and Warren's like, y'all don't know my brother. Like, he's like, my brother is amazing. And nobody really knew until the internet. We started seeing K1 fighting.
Yep.
And they're like, oh, that's Warren Sapp's brother. No, wait, Warren Sapp's his brother.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I get
I was
it
a big
now.
fan of Bob. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, dude, it's amazing. I'm glad you're doing this show. I remember we talked about it, and I was like, man, just go out there and do it, because if people don't talk about these things and keep these stories alive, it's just like any other era where people get older, they die, they don't know these things. And I'm sure in my acting and comedy, as I keep traveling, it's like you'll always run into one of these guys in entertainment.
Sure.
And every time you do, it's like you think the president's around the corner because somebody's like, hey, did you hear that so and so from WWE or
Yeah.
WCW? You just like, whoa, where's he at? I want to go meet him.
It's really
These
like
dudes
that.
are bigger than life, bigger than life.
It's crazy
Yeah.
that it's like that because as many as people like don't think they're fans, in a sense, they're pro wrestling fans. Because if we went say wherever and we're like, oh hey, Bill Goldberg's down the block, you could say that to a random person and they'll be like, oh man, really, Bill Goldberg's down? I'm not saying good or bad about him, but I'm just saying somebody would be, oh man, I'm gonna go see Bill Goldberg just because you want to see him because you know he was a pro wrestler, and you can do that with about it. Kevin Nash would be one. I mean, the dude you say, oh, I saw Kevin Nash over there because he's going to stand down and I'm like, oh my god, that's the guy from the NWO. You know, I mean, it's just it amazes me how I don't want to say, well, it's not like it was when we were in high school where it was okay to be pro wrestling fans, but just not many people were. But now it's outreached. I don't want to say it's outreached, but it's definitely bled into other worlds of entertainment.
Well, isn't it? Because I remember looking on the list, but it's like there's football, obviously, and then you have basketball and baseball in certain markets, but wrestling has been up there above college and racing, NASCAR and IndyCar. Like it's climbing that ladder. And what are we sitting on now? Is there 4 or 5 pro wrestling leagues on cable TV right now?
It depends.
There's quite a few out there.
It. I mean, it's definitely 3 for sure.
Okay.
But excuse me, locally, I mean, you have like OVW, I think is on TV somewhere around Louisville. Memphis Wrestling, I'm sure is on TV. I know it's on YouTube. NWA, I believe, is on CW. And I mean, it's getting to where there's so much. I don't want to say too much, but it's if a person really takes it all in, that's really impressive that they take all that content in a week. I don't keep up. I don't even try. But I mean, it's everywhere now. So I mean, it's a great thing for pro wrestling.
Yeah, to be a kid right now, you're really in a special place where you can just get lost and immerse yourself. And the one thing I was going to say, we're talking about comedy and why these worlds intersect. And, you know, what started getting me is traveling, playing sports and meeting and spending time with so many different people. You start to realize how much we have in common. And it's funny to me because I look at the pro wrestling like football to a certain extent, like basketball, not so much now because you have Twitter and social media, so players are able to engage. But these guys all still play a character. And this character doesn't have to say that he's pro-Trump or pro-Biden.
Mhm.
He doesn't have to say he's pro-abortion or anti-abortion. And that's why I say pro wrestling, investment-wise, I was talking to a guy that had a midget wrestling league,
Mhm.
and I thought it would be really cool if we got a Roku and like a YouTube channel together, and we bring comedians in, and it's like a tag team event where the comedians roast each other, do like a roast battle, and then you get points for that. And then your tag team midget wrestler partner,
Okay.
they wrestle after that, and then it's a combination. It's
Okay.
comedians and midgets
Yeah.
doing a tag team, and you put that shit on TV, and I know people would freaking watch it. I know they would. And it's just like some of the silliness, because I had a guy, we became friends at a comedy show because I was talking about Ultimate Warrior, and Ultimate Warrior lived in Phoenix area,
Mhm.
Scottsdale, Glendale,
Yep.
and he actually went to his wrestling camp as a kid. So
Okay.
he's like, shortly before he died, he's like, this guy, he was really soft. A lot of comedians used to mess with him all the time. And it's like anything else he tells us, any other story, he starts it and then he quits. And he's like, oh, I quit because I didn't like it and all that. And I'm like, so he had recordings at his house of the Ultimate Warrior calling the answering machine and
Oh my
literally
God,
like
dude.
calling him a pussy as a kid.
Dude, I've seen there's videos out there of his school or of his training camps or something like that. It is no joke.
He
If
was
you
killing them kids. He was killing
it
them.
wasn't nobody's having fun. Nobody's doing anything. All right, dude, we are running out of time.
All right, man.
We
It's been good, brother.
we got to
Yo,
wrap it up. Where can people find you on social media? Where can they find your podcast and all that kind of great stuff?
all right. I am Bo Greer on social media. That is BOGREER. And anything you want to relate to me, it is the Country Podcast on YouTube. And just look for the Country Podcast on TikTok. And that is CUNTREE. Made it real easy for people to
Right.
find and know
Yeah.
that it is not for kids.
Right.
So there we go. Thanks a lot, man.
Oh,
I
not a
really
problem.
appreciate this. It's been
Everybody knows
great.
you can find my stuff on Instagram at WrassleVerse with Mike Akers, YouTube at WrassleVerse with Mike Akers. Also on Spotify, all the episodes are up on there as well. So yeah, that's it, man. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on WrassleVerse.